Hi, AFSA. This is your legislative policy advisor, Jonathan Nutman. And today I'm joined by John Spagnola, CEO and president of Veteran Strategic Solutions, and Diane Zumatto, Army vet, former LD for Yangus and AMVETS, and she now serves as a legislative consultant. And today we're going to be discussing the very important issue of written informed consent for our veterans. Um, We've been working on this issue for many months now, and I'll toss it over to John for some background on this issue since he's the one who introduced it to me. And today we're just going to talk about the issue, talk about what we can do now, what we can do as we look towards the future, and what pathways we can best identify to finally get this legislation across the finish line to help the vets that need it the most. John?
John, yeah, I was going to say, John, thanks so much for inviting us on. Really appreciate the opportunity to be amongst your wonderful organization and their members. Yeah, I'm a coalition builder, and I work with the Congress, and like yourself, I work with a lot of the veteran service organizations on like-minded activities. And for years, we've been hearing about the rates of suicide with veterans and how it just continues to escalate, certainly never decreases. And it's always been a concern. And also, I'm particularly interested in health outcomes for veterans. I mean, again, as everyone knows, these guys put their lives on the line for us. They're there and they come back and they need to be given the most optimum treatment that's going to be in their best interest for their particular conditions. And so the more I dug into the issue, the more I'd be a little perplexed why after close to 20 years now, the suicide rates really haven't changed. And I delved into what they call the Veteran Health Handbook. And as a result of the handbook, I learned that currently veterans, when they're provided some of these very high risk medications, such as the antidepressants, the anxiolytics, antipsychotics, the stimulants, and the narcotics, when they're prescribed those, then, which is fine if the doctor feels he's done a risk benefit ratio, which is what a doctor is supposed to do, and he feels that drug is appropriate, then fine. However, the problem that I encountered was that in the book, it says that the veteran has provided this information in verbal fashion versus written fashion. And that got my attention. I mean, there's supposed to be quite a bit of communication between the doctor and the veteran in the interview. And with that communication, they're supposed to discuss, all the treatment options as well as the side effects of the medication so that the veteran is really fully informed and can make a fully informed decision. However, once I realized that the handbook allows for only verbal consent for drugs that have, for instance, the first side effect of the classifications that I just mentioned is suicide ideation. And of course, that's all our concern. Now, if that's the first side effect, and again, other side effects include hallucinations, homicide, depression, anxiety, the typical symptoms, that you hear about that veterans are experiencing, lack of loss of sleep and so on as well. Those are serious situations. And if the veteran is told about those verbally, right, it occurred to me that he might not remember them, right? Also, it occurred to me that there's really no way of knowing if he was actually told them, right? Because it's verbal. How do you monitor verbal consent? Well, how do you enforce verbal consent? You can't. So
Yeah.
technically, not saying this is the case, but technically, you might say that no veteran has received the side effects and understands the side effects of the medications they're taking. Additionally, as part of informed consent, it's mandated again in the handbook, the VHA handbook, the veterans are told that they have treatment options. Again, when I've talked to leaders in the various veteran organizations, as well as many veterans, I have found the vast majority. I mean, it's rare to find the opposite. Do not know the side effects and are not familiar with the fact that they, in fact, have treatment options. And that was really appalling to me because I, like yourself, we've spent a lot of time trying to get some of these effective treatment options into play so the VA would use them, such as chiropractic, acupuncture, hyperbaric treatment, canine, equine. They even have art therapy, music therapy, exercise therapy. There's so many therapies that could be engaged on and the veteran might prefer. And so unless he knows about them, it's not likely he's going to even select anything but take the medication that the doctor suggests. Now, I'm not saying he shouldn't take the medication. It may be, again, if depending on the risk-benefit ratio, but he should have the choice. Because one of the things the veterans aren't aware of is it's their choice. And remember, when they're active military, the doctor is an officer, and he says, you need to take this. There's a typical yes, sir, attitude. Now, as a veteran, it's the veteran's choice. He can choose anything he wants. Additionally, again, per the veteran handbook, he doesn't have to choose anything. He can say, no, I don't want any treatments. But they don't know that. So I feel it's become our mission to make them aware of this because it's their right to be part of the treatment process. And the more they're part of the process, the more they're going to want to take part in it and maintain the protocols that they've agreed to be part of. So sorry, it was a little long-winded, but I wanted to give out a lot of information on the issue.
I appreciate that, John. And, drawing on some personal experience, going to the doctor, especially for, chronic illnesses, like as we mentioned, personally, I know, that can be anxiety inducing. The doctor's using these big words, they're doing these tests on you. You don't necessarily understand everything that's going on. And so, like you said, are they even understanding the verbal consent? So I think that the written consent, will help them. Well, maybe they don't understand it in the time, but they'll go home and they'll be able to read through it when they're in less in that kind of chaotic and anxious state. And then, the other point you touched on that, we focus on at AFSA as well is the other treatments, alternative medicine treatments such as, looking for for things where usually opioids are given out for such, chronic pain and issues like that, looking at non-opioid choices, what choices can we give our veterans that, don't have these really dangerous side effects? And like you said, a lot of the times they're not really made aware of that these are even options, or sometimes with the VA, there really aren't options, but they are out there and they do work for a lot of people and they could help our veterans. So I really appreciate that introduction to
And
the
they may,
issue.
and if I could say, they may want to
Yeah,
start with some of the options, sort of as a gradient, stepping stones, so that they could say, hey, this worked for me, this didn't, I want to try this one, I want to try that one. No, now I want to try the medications. If they know all this exists, then they can approach that as they feel comfortable with.
yeah,
And I just wanted to mention briefly, if in fact, as you mentioned, pain, because of course that's a big symptom that a lot of veterans are confronted with. This is not part maybe of this particular show, but But I think it's important that veterans understand that pain is a signal. It's not a source problem. It says there's something wrong, but it doesn't tell you what is wrong. And if we use a drug to hide the pain temporarily, okay, that's fine. But to do that constantly without getting to the source of the problem, I think does a disservice to our veterans. And instead, I believe we should engage in testing, blood tests for, you know, is it a chemical toxin that could be causing that symptom? And they cause all kinds of symptoms such as anxiety, depression, again, suicide. Um, you know, real significant problems, as well as, you get food or nutrition. If someone is really deficient in nutritional elements and vitamins and minerals, it can also result in anxiety, depression, even suicide and psychosis, things of that nature, neurosis. Um, Hormone imbalances, another key element that I don't think has enough attention paid to it. I work with a neuroendocrinologist. He's taken about 4,000 veterans with traumatic brain injury and tested it properly. He has a great, accurate questionnaire, and he's reversed traumatic brain injury and PTSD just by adjusting hormones. But again, if we don't ask the doctor about these things, we might not have the opportunity to maybe get to the source of the problem, which I think is really crucial for our veterans. They deserve really no less.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very true. So I want to maybe talk about a little bit of the legislative process that we've gone on with this. I know we've had some proposals from some representatives that they were looking to introduce a bill, but there was some pushback from different committees in there. Diane, is that something that you could touch on a little bit?
I I'll be honest, I don't really understand what the hesitation is from the committees. This potentially could not only save veterans' lives, it could save the VA and the government quite a bit of money if we could take care of the problem, figure out what the problem is, and treat that. Then we wouldn't have to have veterans going back and forth to the VA, constantly trying to get a resolution. So this seems to me to be an economical opportunity to help veterans. And I think that if we could finally get it implemented, we would see improvements in by reducing suicide. I mean, imagine a veteran who's fragile for whatever reason, and is being given these very powerful meds without proper education about what they really are, how they work, what the side effects might be, and and then they're just put out into the community, and they don't know how to deal with and could become frightened when some of these side effects come up. Hallucinations. If that happened to me, I'd be terrified. You begin to think that there's something wrong with you personally, not that, oh, the medication is having this effect. And these types of situations and the fear and anxiety that they can cause is really could be enough to push person over the edge into suicide. And that's what we need to stop. We need to save veterans. And this is an issue that is about veterans, not about the VA or doctors per se. We've had, the VA has commented on this before, and our focus is on what's best for the veteran, not what's more convenient for the doctor or the VA system. Let's focus on the patient, on the veteran. They're the ones that have sacrificed. They're the ones that have been through these traumatic experiences. And that's what the VA is there to do. It's to serve the veteran, not themselves. And I think this would be a piece of that could make a big difference.
Yeah. The speaking of focusing on the veteran, I know John has provided me with this material, the printout that we'll have linked below for you all listening. But it's about the title of it is Things to Ask the Doctor When Prescribed Medications at the VA. And I think it's a wonderful printout for people to have because, you might go into a doctor's appointment with questions you want to ask, but then, due to induced anxiety or you get flustered, big words and the doctor's, he's prescribing you things and you're like, 1 second. And like John mentioned, part of the culture is they're used to, our veterans are used to following orders and they're very respectful. So when the doctor says to do something, they fully trust it. So I think it's a wonderful printout. It touches on, dangerous side effects that you should know about, alternative treatment options, and different, differentiating between symptoms and root causes of issues, medical issues. And, I think this is a wonderful tool to have while we look forward to the 119th Congress and seeing what we could do with this bill to get the legislation passed, something that we could do right now to really save lives and focus on the veterans. Could you talk about where you kind of came up with this idea, John, of what can we do now while we're running into this, a lot of friction on the Hill trying to get this legislation passed?
Well, you bring up a great point, John. The whole idea is we want to save lives, and until we get legislation is an evolution. Many times it takes years and years to get something passed, and last thing we want to do is have more lives pass because, something like informed consent wasn't provided and they don't understand the side effects or they might not understand their treatment options. So to put a tourniquet on the problem, if you will, right, we come up with the idea that, hey, here's a form they can take with them. And as you kindly pointed out, they could maybe print out, take with them to the medical interview. Because when you go to a medical interview, it's only natural to be a little nervous. You don't know what's going to happen and what they're going to say, and you could forget, some of these questions that are on the form. Whereas if you have it in writing in front of you, you could just read the questions to the doctor, right? And get your answers. I also suggest, if possible, to bring someone along with you. Because you're nervous, and you've got somebody else there, an advocate, whether it's a spouse or just a real close friend, it can make you feel more comfortable, more likely to engage with the doctor, and the other person could also help engaging with the doctor. I really think that you should have the option of doing that and urge you to do so. So John, your suggestion on putting it on the website, I think is brilliant. And I think it will facilitate, getting more answers, less questions, and Diane touched upon, and eloquently, I might add, she touched upon the idea if you have someone that takes one of these high-risk medications, and you have two scenarios. One is, they're not aware that they're taking a drug, right? That has these side effects. And so therefore they experience, as she pointed out, hallucinations. So what about suicide ideation? And suddenly they think, I'm broken. Why am I hanging around? Why should I bother my wife, my employer, my kids? I'm a burden, and you're getting, you're feeling anxious because that could be a side effect. Or you might feel suicidal and think, I'm just broken. Whereas on the second scenario, you've got into the doctor's office and the doctor now has told you, John or whoever, you might experience suicide ideation. You might experience hallucinations, anxiety, depression. So when it happens, instead of knee jerking or thinking I'm broken and why am I sticking around, you might say to yourself instead, hey, maybe I should check my doctor on the symptoms I'm experiencing to find out if they might be coming from the medication, before you do anything drastic. There's the 800 number that the VA provides. That's there to give more time so that you won't do anything more drastic. Well, this written informed consent, I think, would provide even more assurance that you'll have adequate time, to find out what's really going on before taking any drastic action.
Yeah. Yeah, I really I appreciate you all for being here. And I think we have, as John described it, a tourniquet that we can kind of administrate to as many people as possible, because this is an urgent and pressing matter, and it needs urgent and pressing attention. And so I'll have that link below, as well as all of the supporting documentation, the history of written informed consent, all the things we touched on, from understanding the black box medications, the risks of suicidal ideation, challenges with the current system of verbal informed consent, in conjunction with, people being anxious, rightfully so, when going to the doctor. And then also some stuff about how as we move towards the 119th, while we have these, immediate fixes, band-aids in place, what we can do to get this legislation moving forward as we move towards the 119th. So I really just want to thank you, Diane. Thank you, John, for joining me today. I think this was very informative and then well-rounded discussion, and I think it can help many people. And if you all have some closing things to say, please be my guest.
John, go ahead.
Diane? No, I
Okay,
was going to say ladies first.
oh, okay, I appreciate that. One of the nice options available if we were to implement this system is that the physician could provide a printout of the information that was either discussed, or at least the information regarding the black box medications. Currently, when you get a prescription from the VA, you get a long multi-page printout, but it's not really in layman's language, if we can say that. And that's what we need. We don't need, 10 pages of medical speak. We need to have concise breakdown, essentially, of what the most important aspects are, or at least what the most expected side effects could be, so the patient can be prepared. If you're prepared, then you're less likely to take the drastic step of committing suicide. And that's the ultimate goal of this legislation, to eliminate, or at minimally to reduce suicide as much as possible.
I just wanted to add, first of all, that, yeah, I agree 100% with that. I just wanted to add that veterans should realize that when they're talking to the doctor or medical professionals, that it's mandated that they're told whatever they're being communicated by the doctor in a language that they understand. So it is not only okay, but you're right to say, doctor, I don't understand what you're saying. Can you break that down for me? Could you make it more simple? And don't feel humiliated because you didn't go to medical school. And if they're using medical terms and so on, then you need to protect yourself, your family, and your life. And just ask them, clarify. I want to understand this before I leave. I don't want to leave and then wonder what it is I'm taking or what I'm doing. So anyways, I just wanted to say, you know, we need to take care of our veterans, and the first step is for you to realize your rights so you can take care of yourself. And John, I want to thank you so much for giving the opportunity to, communicate about the issue. And we're hoping that, if anyone has questions, by the way, they can reach me at just John Spagnola, Spagnola, at gmail.com. And actually, it's john.spagnola if it's at gmail.com, but johnspagnola.org is my website.
Awesome. Thank you, John, and thank you, Diane. And we'll be able to link some of the contact information down below, as well as I said before, with all the supporting documentation and that printout that our veterans can bring to the VA for their medical appointments and interviews. And just in closing, I think this is an issue that we have to get moving forward in the 119th, and I'm confident that we will. And I look forward to seeing you both. I'm sure I'll see you on Capitol Hill. I'll join you in the fight, and we'll get this done. So thank you once again for joining us. I think this was wonderful, and we'll have to do it again sometime.
Thanks, John.
Look forward to it. Thanks for working. Really enjoy working with you, John.
My pleasure.